One day, crowds of people were rushing down the steps, as they usually do, to get on the subway at the Times Square station in New York City. But in the middle of those stairs was a shabby, shirtless man who was lying there unconscious. Yet no one seemed to notice. Everyone just stepped right over him and hurried on their way. Finally, though, someone decided to stop and to see what was wrong with that fellow. And you know what? As soon as that one person stopped to see what they could do to help, others were suddenly drawn in to see what they could do to help as well. One person ran to a nearby hot dog vendor to get the man something to eat. Another found a bottle of water for him to drink, and someone else flagged down a police officer who radioed for help. And within minutes, that man was sitting up, eating and drinking as they waited for the ambulance to arrive. It turned out that that man had no money, and he had just been wandering the city streets starving until he had eventually collapsed there on those stairs. And it's entirely possible that he could have died right there if no one had bothered to stop and help him. But because of one person's concern, because one person was willing to step forward and do what they could to help someone else, all of a sudden, a whole community of concern was formed. People who had never known each other, and people who had probably never cared about each other before, were suddenly drawn together. But why was that man left lying there for so long? I think, unfortunately, the answer is rather obvious. That man was left lying there for so long before someone helped him, because many people live their lives today based on the motto, mind your own business. We figure that if something or someone is not directly connected to us, then you should just ignore them. You should just walk away. You should just mind your own business. Yes, at times, minding your own business can be a good motto to keep in mind. After all, no one really likes it when someone is always going around and butting in and nosing around in things that don't really pertain to them. But as Christians, Jesus calls us to something more than to just mind our own business. Because as Christians, Jesus calls us to see the duty that we have to care for the people around us so that we might come together and live together as a community. A community where there's a bond of love that connects us and where Jesus is at the heart of who we are. And that's what this passage in Ephesians is all about. Here in this passage, we receive guidance so that how we can move from being just a group of people where everyone's minding their own business, so that we might come together and be the kind of community that Christ wants us to be. And so here in this passage, we're told to speak the truth to each other. Not just because it's not nice to lie, but instead, we're told to speak the truth because if we are going to come together and be a community, then we need to be able to take each other at our word and trust each other. In the same way, the passage says that thieves should give up stealing and take up some honest kind of work. But notice that thieves are told to stop stealing, not just because stealing is a sin. Rather, thieves are told to stop sinning and to take up some honest kind of work, so that then they will have something that they can offer to the people around them in the community who might need some kind of help. And in the same way, we're told to get rid of anger and bitterness and spiteful words, because those are the kinds of things that divide us from each other and alienate us. And in place of those negative things, we're to take on a positive spirit of forgiveness, so that even if we might offend each other or get on each other's nerves from time to time, our overwhelming concern will be to overcome those offenses, so that we might remain connected to each other as the community that Jesus wants us to be. After all, when Jesus came into the world, he didn't write a book. Yes, years after Jesus was crucified and resurrected and lifted up into heaven, others came along and wrote the Gospels that tell us about what Jesus said and did and taught. But the legacy that Jesus himself left behind to show what he was all about was not a book, but a community. The legacy that Jesus himself left behind to show what he was all about was a community called the church. People whose lives had been changed by God and who were now devoted to loving and caring for each other and loving and caring for the people around them, with Jesus at the heart of who they were. Today, though, one of the challenges we have as Christians is that we live in a very individualistic society. Today, we live in a society where many people just look out for themselves, where many people just mind their own business. And so one of the challenges that we have as Christians today is to rediscover what it means to live out our faith, not just as an individual believer, but what it means to live out our life as part of a community of believers. There's a town in Italy about 100 miles southeast of Rome called Roseto Valfatore. Well, beginning in 1882, many families began to leave that town in Italy and moved here to the United States, with many of those people ending up settling in the eastern part of Pennsylvania, near the city of Bangor, in a town that would eventually be called Roseto, named after the city in Italy that they had left behind. But over the years, doctors and other healthcare providers began to notice something. For one thing, they noticed that people in Roseto under the age of 55 never had any kind of heart problem. And of those people in Roseto who were older than 55, their rate of heart disease and death was less than half of the national